Welcome to Module 5, Personal Protective Equipment and Hearing Conservation. This course has been designed to be taken individually or to be led by a facilitator who will make connections to your local setting. Anyone who takes this course on an individual basis will be required to have a discussion with their supervisor as a condition to complete the course. The learning objectives for this course are: list the 4 steps of the hazard assessment process, describe the hazard mitigation process, identify who can help an employee make the appropriate PPE determination, identify what resources are used to help make the appropriate PPE selection, describe the impact of failing to address hearing conservation, demonstrate how to use the noise reduction rate, or NRR, to determine decibel attenuation. Before we get into the different types of PPE, please discuss how the appropriate PPE is determined. Safety regulations require the company and employees to conduct a hazard assessment to determine the hazards and the appropriate controls. During the assessment, it is important to consider the potential hazards that currently exist or may develop as the task is executed. There are 4 steps of a hazard assessment. First is to define the hazards, as well as potential hazards if the situation were to change. Next is to define the consequences the hazards will pose. Third is the need to constantly evaluate conditions to ensure the task remains as safe as possible. The result of the first 3 steps is the control for the defined hazards. This includes PPE as well as other types of controls. When questions exist, contact your health and safety manager. Clean Harbors performs an incredible variety of work, some of which is unique to a line of business. Take a minute to define the types of hazards you may be exposed to and rank them in the order of which ones are most likely to be present. This list is an example of hazards that anyone may be presented with. This is not a complete list and it will vary from branch to branch. One thing to keep in mind is conditions will vary, so constant hazard recognition is critical. There are 2 primary methods to mitigate hazards. One is through the use of personal protective equipment, and the other is by using a hazard control to prevent exposure to the hazards and their consequences. Let's take a moment to review hazard controls. The first control in the hazard control hierarchy is the engineering control. The goal of engineering controls is to eliminate the hazard or the employee's potential for exposure to a hazard. What is an example of an engineering control that is present in the tasks that you participate in? Engineering controls will vary based on what hazard needs to be mitigated, but some examples include ventilation systems, vibration-absorbing motor mounts, barriers and enclosures, which may be a lid on a process vat that protects materials splashing out or one that prevents vapors from escaping. In summary, an engineering control is anything built into the design of equipment that is meant to protect those working with or around the item. The second control of the hazard control hierarchy are administrative controls. These are the regulations, standards, guidelines, procedures, and safe work practices in place for nearly every activity. These are documents that provide an understanding of how to perform a task in such a way to minimize the potential for unwanted consequences, like a spill, injury, or other loss. Examples of these controls are the company's standards and policies found on the Health and Safety SharePoint page. While hazard controls are an important part of hazard assessment, they are not the only part of keeping employees safe. When potential hazards have not been reduced to an acceptable level of control, personal protective equipment will be used to protect an employee. Advance to the next slide for a head-to-toe look at the types of personal protective equipment that is available to us and when each will be used. Shown here are the categories of PPE. Prior to clicking each PPE, consider why that PPE is used, what types of activities require that type of PPE, and What factors go into the selection of the appropriate style of PPE? You must view each PPE before advancing. Head protection is used to safeguard employees from falling or flying objects, as well as electrical current or high-temperature exposure. Each hard hat is designed with a head harness and suspension to absorb the energy from an impact. The outer shell of the hard hat is designed to withstand penetration by sharp objects, as well as not burn easily. Some hard hats are also designed with side impact protection. Certain regulatory agencies and clients may require us to use a wide range of head protection to mitigate the consequences of the hazards associated with the work. Eye and face protection must meet specific safety standards to provide safeguards from impact, splash, and particulate or vapor exposure to the face and eyes. The selected equipment must be comfortable enough to ensure individuals will wear them and must fit securely enough that they will not fall off during movement. In situations where safety glasses are shared between individuals, it is required that they be disinfected between each use. If the equipment can't be cleaned or shows signs of any type of damage, they should be replaced with new equipment. Prescription glasses are not designed to withstand exposure or provide impact resistance like with safety eyewear. When wearing corrective lenses, any covering wore over the glasses must be able to perform as a primary eye protection and provide impact resistance and side protection. The company has a safety glasses program that will allow employees to have corrective lenses built into safety frames or into safety inserts for full-face respirators. Forms for prescription safety goggles and respirator inserts are readily available on the Health and Safety SharePoint site. There is specialty equipment for face and eye protection that can protect the employee from a variety of hazards, including heat, high impact, and non-iodizing radiation protection. Plastic face shields are designed to provide additional splash protection, but often do not meet impact resistance requirements. As a result, safety glasses must be worn under the face shield to provide that primary eye protection. Your hands are your most valuable tool and will serve you long after you leave Clean Harbors. The hands often have the most exposure and are presented with a great variety of hazards. To select the correct hand protection, each expected hazard must be considered. The Clean Harbors PPE standard requires hand protection to have permeation data available for the chemicals that are expected to be present and for the permeation data to be a critical part of the PPE selection. In reviewing the requirements of hand protection, as well as the hazards present in the workplace, it is not surprising that there are many different types of gloves that must be used to provide the proper protection. Often, the gloves may have to be worn in layers to provide the needed protection. The review of the PPE hazards, SOP or JHA, can answer many questions about the specific types of gloves needed for the job. Hazards to your feet range from dropped tools, drums, forklifts, and sharp objects. The proper foot protection needs to provide impact protection from falling objects, compression protection from rolling objects, and provide puncture protection from sharp or pointed objects. Also, do not forget that chemical protection must be considered for some operations. Chemical foot protection is determined by looking at the manufacturer's permeation data. The standard work boot within Clean Harbors is a 6-inch high boot with a raised heel and protective toe cap. This style protects from the common hazards that were just discussed, as well as provide ankle support to minimize sprains and strains. The Health and Safety SharePoint site provides forms for ordering foot protection. Please note that a new pair of boots can be ordered on an annual basis. With the variety of chemicals found in the workplace, Not all equipment is protective against everything. For instance, a material used in protective clothing may be protective against a corrosive, but have little to no protection against solvents. The types of chemical protective clothing, or CPC, may include a simple apron all the way up to a totally encapsulating airtight suit. Therefore, many types of PPE are available for selection, and you may see different types of PPE used from one area of work to the next. As discussed previously with gloves and boots, chemical permeation data is an important factor in selecting the proper PPE garment. When selecting chemical protective clothing, the items to consider are the material's resistance to attack. This is why permeation protection from specific chemicals is examined. The type of work to be completed and how long it may take. The likelihood of contact and what parts of the body will be impacted. If the garment needs to be decontaminated and reused, or if it will be disposed of after use. PPE may limit the person's mobility, so the identification of this factor needs to be considered to ensure the protection is still capable of doing the job. The PPE must be durable enough to protect you from the expected hazard. Since PPE adds another layer of insulation and protection, the heat kept inside adds heat load to the employee and can cause heat stress. Cost is a factor, but not if it reduces the ability to protect the employee. If there are two similarly protective garments or gloves, then cost can be the deciding factor in our choice. Other things to consider include observations from the site assessment, including limitations of the site, expected weather conditions, the types of chemicals, and also the presence of additional hazards. Since hazards vary, the selection criteria will be based upon the physical, chemical, and environmental hazards that are present. Remember, chemical permeation is always used to decide the right chemical protective equipment. If there are any questions about the selection, inspection, or use of PPE, always ask your supervisor or health and safety representative for clarification. Chemical protective clothing is classified by 4 different levels. Click the tabs at the top of the screen for an overview of each level. The highest level of protection is Level A. This provides the most protection possible for the eyes, respiratory system, and skin. Level A is used for unknown chemical hazards, IDLH, and conditions that present a skin toxin exposure hazard. Although these situations make up 1% or less of the work the company performs, certain hazards during emergency response and chemical cleanings require this protection. The health and safety manager will always be involved in the selection, training, and use of the Level A equipment. The Level A ensemble is comprised of a full-face mask and self-contained breathing apparatus for eye, face, and respiratory protection. It includes a totally encapsulating chemical protective suit, which is airtight. Chemical protection gloves and boots completes the skin protection provided by the ensemble. Level B is the next level of protection identified in the PPE standard. Level B still provides the highest protection for the eyes and respiratory system. However, since it is not vapor-tight, it does not provide the same level of skin protection as Level A. In hazardous conditions, where the chemicals are known, but the level of exposure is not, Level B will be the minimum level of protection required for initial site entry and evaluation. This level of protection is necessary for any activity where airborne chemical concentrations exceed the limitations of an air-purifying respirator. Oxygen-deficient and IDLH conditions are also conditions which would require a minimum of Level B protection. Selection of Level B protection must be discussed with the health and safety manager to ensure all criteria has been confirmed. The Level B PPE ensemble will include a full face mask with supplied air respiratory protection system, which could be a SAR or SCBA. Chemical gloves, boots, and protective suit with tape around any openings completes the ensemble. Level C protection is based upon the selection criteria for an APR. This level of protection requires known chemicals and the concentrations, and those concentrations cannot exceed the usage limitations of the APR. The atmosphere cannot be oxygen deficient or IDLH. Finally, the confirmation of air concentrations need to be made and shown to be within the level C action limits as defined in the Respiratory Protection Standard. This level provides a protection from contact as well as protection to eyes and respiratory system with the use of an air purifying respirator. The lowest level of chemical protective clothing is level D. The main difference between this level and the others is that respiratory protection is not required. Clearly, this means there is less risk of exposure during the task, but please know that there still will be some level of risk. Level D PPE ensemble includes, at minimum, the uniform, safety glasses, gloves, and appropriate safety boots. Making the correct PPE selection is not always obvious, and as a result, there are numerous resources to help. First are the health and safety managers. This role will provide guidance to help employees make the correct PPE selection for their assigned tasks. There are also numerous documents that will describe a task's appropriate PPE. This includes our SOPs and JHAs, as well as a material SDS. There are also other sources, like the ones listed on the screen, that will also provide guidance on selecting the correct PPE. Once PPE has been selected, it is your responsibility to inspect the PPE prior to each use. Any damaged PPE or PPE that is in question must be removed from service and replaced. When not in use, all PPE must be stored correctly. Whether that is in your locker, your assigned vehicle, or in an equipment bag, your PPE must be available and in serviceable condition when you need it. In the resources, or with the handout the trainer passes out, complete the PPE exercise. On this document, identify what type of chemical protective clothing and gloves are required to handle the chemical hazard. A previous module discussed the medical surveillance program and the hearing exam. This portion of the class will discuss how to protect your hearing so it won't be an issue during the aforementioned hearing exam. So why is hearing protection important to our type of work? Often, we work in very loud environments, and the risk is, over time, noise can result in permanent damage. The good news is, hearing loss is preventable by wearing hearing protection. But conversely, if you don't use your PPE, hearing loss is irreversible. Remember, the ear has three areas: the outer ear, middle ear, and inner ear. The outer ear is what is exposed to the outside and includes the ear, ear canal, and the tympanum or eardrum. The middle ear contains specialized bones that mechanically transfer sound from the outer ear to the inner ear. The inner ear is the cochlea, which includes the oval window, the snail-shaped organ that is lined with hair-like nerve fibers. When sound is transmitted, the sound waves hit the eardrum and make it vibrate. This also vibrates the bones in the middle ear, which taps upon the oval window of the inner ear. The fluid within that inner ear then propagates that vibration and causes the nerve fibers to wave back and forth, which creates an electrical signal that is transmitted to the brain through the oral nerve. A failure along any part of that system may result in hearing loss. When there is damage to the nerve cells in the inner ear, no electrical signal will be sent to the brain, which results in permanent hearing loss. Now, identify under what conditions hearing protection is necessary. Clean Harbors requires hearing protection when engineering controls cannot be used to reduce noise levels below Clean Harbors criteria, which is 85 decibels, but may be different due to federal, state, or provincial legislation. As a best practice, please consult your health and safety manager for guidance. This table shows how long someone can be exposed to the decibel levels before the time-weighted average, or TWA, would be exceeded. TWA is used as a consideration during industrial hygiene testing to ensure tasks in an area are less than what is needed to confirm noise exposure is not a concern. In addition, as you can see on the chart, or the provided graphic, the louder the sound, the more pressure it exerts on the ear. As a result, louder sounds necessitate shorter exposure durations. When noise exposure is a concern, hearing protection will be implemented and signs will be posted signifying the danger. This table shows what the sound level and decibels are for certain tasks. Based upon this information, hearing protection is required in any situation that requires one to shout over background noise. Let's talk about hearing protection devices and then determine what kind of hearing protection level we need. There are 3 types of hearing protection devices. Each one is designed to reduce the sound pressure that reaches the ears. This means they do not remove sound, but rather dampen how much gets to the ears. After discussing the advantages and disadvantages of each, click the type for a summary.
Hi, this is Dan from ePlugs.com answering the question today. How do you put in ePlugs so you get the highest noise reduction possible? First things first. Take your ePlugs and roll them around like this until they become a really small sausage. Then pull your ear back and insert the ePlugs into your ear canal like this, but no farther than this. Wait 20 to 40 seconds for the foam to expand. Then, after this time, if the ePlugs are still coming out, press again for another 5 to 10 seconds for the foam to fully expand. Once that's done, you have the highest noise reduction possible. If you have any questions, go to our website, e-plugz.com. That's e-plugz.com. Thanks. Have a great day.
While the previous slide demonstrated how to use earplugs, it is important to follow the manufacturer's instructions. When they are used, always follow good hygiene practices. This includes having clean hands before inserting the plugs in your ear. Also, don't use dirty plugs. For single use, dispose of them at the end of the shift, and for multiple use, dispose of them every 2 to 4 weeks unless they are dirty. Shown here are some of the advantages that you discussed. This includes how earplugs are more comfortable to wear, cheaper to obtain, and more compatible with hard hats. The disadvantages are how inconsistent the attenuation or sound reduction is. It is also hard for supervisors to confirm earplugs are actually being used. With regard to semi-inserts, follow the manufacturer's instructions on use. As a suggestion, for a better fit into the ear canal, reach over the head, hold the ear up and out to insert the earplugs into the ear canal. Like with earplugs, conduct an acoustic check prior to use. Also, be sure the pods for the earplugs are clean. Replace them every 2 to 4 weeks. An advantage of semi-inserts is with the convenience of taking them on and off. As a result, they're good for shorter duration activities that may result in the need to switch between the use of hearing protection and no hearing protection. The disadvantage of earplugs is that their attenuation is less than earplugs and ear muffs. Semi-inserts also result in a more noticeable occlusion effect, which is when someone perceives their own voice to have a hollow, booming, or echo-like sound. Last, some people find the band to be distracting or uncomfortable. Like with all of the equipment that has been discussed, always follow the manufacturer's instructions on use. Ear muffs must be inspected before use and then stored in a clean and dust-free location when they are done. With regard to the fit of the ear muffs, the muff must seal completely around the ear. As necessary, adjust the headband to fit the head by sliding the headband up or down. If glasses are worn, make sure the glasses temple does not break the seals of the earmuff. Muffs often have to be replaced every 6 months or sooner if defects or deterioration are noted. The advantages of earmuffs are with regard to its fit and also help in colder environments. Earmuffs are also advantageous in situations that require intermittent use, since they're easy to take on and off. It is also very easy for managers to confirm if hearing protection is being used. Some of the disadvantages of earmuffs are with the pressure the headband puts on the wearer. Earmuffs are also uncomfortable in heat. Last, earmuffs may not be compatible with all safety gear. So how much hearing protection is needed? As stated earlier, hearing protection dampens sound, and the amount of sound it dampens is quantified and listed as NRR, or noise reduction rate. The NRR is used to determine how many decibels of sound will be reduced. Under the Clean Harbors Hearing Conservation Program, the equation shown here is what is used to calculate the attenuation, which is the level of sound reduction. This number is directly dependent on the equipment being used correctly. For example, you are using earmuffs that have a NRR of 31. How many decibels will it decrease the sound? If equipment has a NRR of 31, 31 minus 7 is 24, and 24 divided by 2 is 12. This means if you are in an area where the decibel level is 92, and this hearing protection device is in use, the sound that reaches our ears is 92 minus 12, or 80 decibels. The desired level is to have attenuated sound of 75 to 85 decibels. If sound is attenuated too much, personnel cannot hear other sounds important to their safety. There are times when one hearing protection device does not provide enough attenuation to sufficiently reduce the sound levels. In these cases, you would have to use ear plugs and ear muffs in concert. The formula to determine the amount of attenuation is the same as before, plus 5. For example, the use of ear muffs with an NRR of 31 plus ear plugs has an attenuation of 17 decibels. This would reduce a 97 decibel sound to an acceptable 80 decibels. If the noise levels are higher than that, contact management and health and safety to discuss other methods of sound reduction. As guidance, there is a list of tasks within the Hearing Conservation Program that recommends double hearing protection to be used. In the resources, or using the handout the trainer passes out, complete the 5 questions on hearing protection. In summary, PPE is only useful if it is worn. The consequences of not wearing PPE could result in significant illness, injury, or death, so be sure to always wear the appropriate PPE. If you have questions, always consult with your supervisor or health and safety manager. This course is now complete. At this point, you should be able to list the 4 steps of the hazard assessment process, describe the hazard mitigation process, identify who can help an employee make the appropriate PPE determination, determine the sources that help make the appropriate PPE selection, describe the impacts of failing to address hearing conservation, demonstrate how to use the noise reduction rate to determine decibel attenuation. Please advance to the next slide to attempt the course's learning check.